Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time this video finds you. I hope you're doing well. My name is Landon, and I'm a clinical exercise physiologist, and I have over a decade's worth of experience in cardiac and vascular rehab. I'm also a registered dietitian nutritionist, and I currently work at Christus Mother Francis in the Heart Hospital. You can find me in the Lewis and Peaches Tower there. And I'm also an adjunct clinical instructor at Stephen F. Austin State University. So needless to say, I've been blessed with a lot of experience with patients and reading research on the benefits of exercise, and specifically exercise and hypertension. So I hope to share some of that with you today. So I want to start off with one story. This happened way back in the 1950s. So there was an individual named Morris, and him and his colleagues got together and they said, hey, let's see if there's a difference between individuals that move a lot throughout the day and maybe don't move as much. So what they did was they found some city workers and they said, let's follow them for the next 20, 30 years and let's just kind of see what kind of health outcomes that we see. So this is known as the double-decker bus study in London. And so what they did was they followed two different workers. One was the bus driver, who sat for about 8 hours at a time every day and didn't do a whole lot of activity. Maybe went and grabbed his lunch, but didn't do a whole lot. And then there was the bus conductor. And back in these days, the conductor was different from what we think about as being the conductor of a steam engine or something. This conductor actually took the tickets of the passengers and walked up and down a flight of stairs, because these are big buses. These are big double-decker buses. But it's not a whole lot of movement still. But they would walk down, grab tickets, make sure people were seated, go up and down. So they followed these individuals over the course of time. And what they found was pretty astonishing. They found that the conductors, who did mainly sitting throughout the day, had a significantly higher risk of cardiovascular disease and early mortality than those of the conductors. Now, keep in mind, in this study, the conductors, they weren't moving a whole lot. They were walking a flight of stairs maybe once, maybe twice an hour, walking up and down these rows, maybe 20, 30 feet. So it wasn't a whole lot of activity, but it was just doing more than the bus drivers did and doing something. So I want to start off today by saying anything that you're able to do, any type of movement, is going to be super beneficial and super helpful. Not only when it comes to high blood pressure and hypertension, but for the risk of mortality in general and improving outcomes. So let's talk a little bit about your heart. So your heart is roughly the size of your fist, maybe a fist and a half or two fists kind of clasped together, depending on which research paper you read. And this heart pumps about 100,000 times a day. So amazing amount of work that this small organ does inside of your body. And it pumps over 60,000 miles of vessels. And so if to kind of put this in perspective, 60,000 miles is enough to go around the earth more than twice. And that is all coiled up and wrapped up inside of you. So your heart does a ton of work. Now, you have to maintain blood pressure in order to pump this blood throughout your body. So it's super important that we maintain blood pressure at an appropriate level. So we typically want to see blood pressure around 120 over 70 or less, depending on which research paper you read, but that's going to kind of be our goal to shoot for. Now, I want to talk with you a little bit about exercise and just what it can do for blood pressure and just risks in general. So I'm going to read some statistics to you, and I'm just going to kind of go through these because there's a lot. And keep in mind that I'm just scratching the surface. And when I talk about risk reduction, I'm not talking about in any of these events. I'm not talking about a marathon running or high-intensity exercise. I'm talking about bare minimum 30 minutes of walking or movement every day to get these benefits. So let's start off. So one big risk reduction that exercise can do is in stroke. Do you know that if you're physically active, you can reduce your risk of stroke by 32%? And that increases to 58% if you're over the age of 60. That's pretty amazing. When we talk about cardiovascular disease, do you know that not exercising is actually akin to smoking as far as your risk is concerned? So being physically inactive puts the same amount of risk on an individual that of smoking would. How crazy is that? Most people don't think about low fitness as a strong predictor of mortality and disease, but it can be just as strong as some of the strongest risk factors that we know about, such as smoking. So keep that in mind, that even small activity can make a huge difference. Exercise can also reduce the risk of cancer. Just leisure activity, an increase in leisure activity was shown to reduce the risk of more than 13 different types of cancer. Improve muscle strength, and just strength training throughout the week was shown to reduce the risk of cancer mortality by 34%. It can reduce the risk of cardiovascular inflammatory biomarkers by 33% in those that did it several days per week. And it can greatly reduce the risk of the development of diabetes by up to 58%. And this number increases if you're above the age of 60 to 71% risk reduction in diabetes. So hear me when I say that. A lot of medications, a lot of studies that look at risk reduction. I mean, if we can get 5% risk reduction, that's amazing. And these numbers I'm throwing out are unheard of. This is truly amazing. Over 71% risk reduction from exercise. So I want to get you excited about exercise and excited about what all it can do for you. And keep in mind, again, I want to just reiterate, I'm not talking about marathon running or super high intensity stuff. I'm talking about walking, and just 30 minutes a day can get you many of these benefits. Now, there's lots more benefits I could talk about, but I just wanted to kind of touch base on a few things. And then let's come to hypertension here. Do you know that exercise and consistent exercise can reduce your risk for the development of hypertension by 27%. It can also decrease diastolic and systolic blood pressure. So let me stop for a minute and let's talk about diastolic and systolic blood pressure. So systolic blood pressure is the pressure in the walls of the artery when the heart is beating or when it's contracting, when it's under systole or contraction. And diastolic blood pressure is the pressure in the walls of the artery when your heart is at rest, in between those beats. So you have a top number and a bottom number, the top number being systolic blood pressure and the bottom number being diastolic blood pressure. So exercising several days a week is associated with around a 10 to 15% reduction in systolic blood pressure. So roughly 10 to 15 millimeters of mercury, consistent exercise can reduce that systolic blood pressure. Diastolic blood pressure, we can see the same thing, around 5 to 10 millimeters of mercury reduction in blood pressure in individuals that do have high blood pressure. So pretty amazing things. This is akin to a lot of blood pressure medicines, the risk reduction that you can have. And so there truly is no medicine that does what exercise will do for your body. Now, I'm not saying that to say don't take your medicine and exercise. No, definitely take your medicine, follow your cardiologist or your physician's recommendations with medications. But just think of the benefit you can get if you add exercise on top of that. So let's talk about kind of what we can do with exercise and kind of a framework. So I've talked a lot about exercise and the benefits of exercise and how great it can be for your health. But what am I talking about? What type of exercise do you need to do to get these benefits? So let's break it down. So there's something called the FIT principle, and it's FITT, frequency, intensity, time, and type. So I'm going to walk through each one of these to give you an exercise prescription that you can take with you to get many of these benefits that we've talked about. And if you're interested in more of these, because I just mentioned the top 5 or 6 benefits of exercise, but there literally are pages of this that you can go through. If you go to the American College of Sports Medicine, you go to their exercises medicine fact sheet, you will see just pages and pages of risk reduction, from Alzheimer's disease risk to different types of cancer, to cholesterol and high cholesterol risk reduction, all kinds of things you can see from this. So I encourage you to go look at that. If you did a quick Google Scholar search of research articles on the benefits of exercise, it would just about overload your computer. There's so many different cool research articles out there on it. So I encourage you to look at those and to dive into some of that. So let's talk about how often, when gets us the most benefit from exercise. So when thinking about the FIT principle, frequency, we want to be doing this most every day during the week. So 5 to 7 days gets the most benefit, a minimum of 5 days if possible. That seems to be the gold standard for benefit in many of these studies. Intensity, we want to do moderate intensity exercise. And you may be thinking, well, that's great, but what in the world is moderate intensity exercise? Well, I'm going to give you an easy way to determine what moderate intensity exercise is. You can use a watch, a Fitbit, to give you heart rate ranges that tells you what percentage you're in, if you're in moderate intensity, zone 2 training or zone 3 or whatever. But you don't have to be that complex either. Maybe you don't have any of those things. You can simply use something called the talk test. And so the talk test is kind of what it sounds like. If you are going for a bout of exercise and you can sing while you're doing the exercise, then you're in what's called low intensity exercise. And so now exercise won't help you to sing. Believe me, it has done nothing for my singing voice, and I've been exercising for years, but it can help you to determine where you're at. And so if you have enough wind to carry a tune to some extent, then you're in what's called low intensity exercise. Moderate intensity exercise is where you don't have enough wind to carry on a tune, but you have enough that you could carry on a conversation. Now, you'll be able to tell that you're breathing heavier, but you'll be able to talk. Now, not as long-winded as I'm being in this conversation, but you'll be able to carry on a conversation with someone that's moderate intensity. Now, vigorous intensity exercise, that's where maybe you get out a word or two, but it's pretty high intense. You can't speak much. That would be considered vigorous intensity exercise. Now, before you start an exercise program, you certainly want to talk to your doctor to make sure that you are ready to start one. But moderate intensity is a great place to start. And then vigorous intensity exercise is great. But again, you want to make sure you have your physician's approval before you dive into something that intense. And so we talked about frequency. We talked about intensity. Now we'll dive into time. So how much time do we want to be getting when we are exercising? So the gold standard is a minimum of 30 minutes most days per week. So 30 minutes is kind of that gold standard where you can get a lot of benefits that I've talked about. And this roughly winds up to being about 150 minutes a week. If you do vigorous intensity, this could be a little less time, higher intensity. So it can be around 75 minutes a week. So 150 minutes a week at moderate intensity is roughly 30 minutes a day. 75 minutes a week is roughly 15 minutes a day of higher, more vigorous intensity exercise. And so that's kind of where we want you to be at as far as the time. Now, more is better. More gives you just a greater benefit, but the rate of return is a little bit more granular after that 30-minute mark. And we want to at least be getting 30 minutes. And when I say 30 minutes, I've had a lot of patients in the past say, well, I mow the yard or I do this, and I know I'm getting a lot of exercise in, and that's great, and maybe you are. But I've had a lot of patients tell me that, and then I find out that they're on a riding lawnmower, or maybe they're taking their car and they're driving down to the mailbox and say, well, I check the mail every day, but maybe they drive down and they get out and check their mail, but they drove in their car and didn't walk there. So we want to make sure for it to be exercise that it is rhythmic in nature, it is continuous, using large muscle groups, and we have elevated heart rate and breathing for the entire 30 minutes. Now, that doesn't mean you can't take breaks if you need to. By all means, do that. But we want the majority of that 30 minutes to have elevated heart rate and breathing and to have consistent, persistent movement. That's kind of the key there. So we talked about frequency. We want to do that most days per week. Intensity, at least moderate intensity exercise. Time, we want to be getting 30 minutes at least most every day. Again, more time is better, but that 30 minutes is kind of the gold standard. And then the type of activity makes a big difference too. So we want to be doing aerobic exercise. Has been shown to be very beneficial for reducing the risk of high blood pressure and to get many of the benefits that I've talked about in risk factor reduction. That's going to be kind of the big thing, but then also strength training. Strength training can be very beneficial, and it can really help to boost reductions in high blood pressure. And so strength training at least a couple times a week, focusing on large muscle groups, that can make a big difference as far as risk reduction and improvements in health. So I hope this helps some to give you a framework for how to exercise and how to go about reducing your risk. And keep in mind that you may have a lot of stuff going on, a lot of challenges each and every day, but some movement is going to be better than nothing. Maybe you can't go and do a full exercise routine, but maybe you can walk a little bit more. Maybe you can take the stairs if you're able, if your knees are able, throughout the day or throughout the week, or maybe you can do just a little bit more walking, maybe park a little further back at the gym. I can't tell you how many times I see people go into the gym to work out and they'll try to fight for that spot right up next to the gym door, and I'm thinking, man, we're going to go work out. Let's start early. Let's park way back in that parking lot, get a good warm up on the way in, and just rock and roll with that exercise. So maybe that's something too. Maybe it's just parking a little further out before you go into work, but all these things can add up over time and really help to benefit you and your body. So I wish you all the best of health, and I hope these tips and tricks are very beneficial and helpful. And I'll see you next time. Thank you so much.